The Adeptus Astra Telepathica, known as the Divisio Astra Telepathica, or simply as the Astra Telepathica before the Horus Heresy, is an adepta of the Adeptus Terra, responsible for the recruitment and training of psychers in the service of the Imperium of Man. In the time before the reformation of the Imperium after the Horus Heresy in the time of rebirth, the Astra Telepathica was responsible for overseeing the psychic beacon of the Astronomicon and for administering the communications duties of astrotelepaths. The former duty was eventually handed over to a new organization, the Adeptus Astronomica, after the end of the heresy. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica is currently headquartered in a vast palace complex on Terra called the Obsidian Keep. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica finds, recruits, and trains the majority of Imperial Psychers, who become known as Sanctioned Psychers. Most die during testing, but those who survive might become sanctioned into duty with the Astra Militarum or become astropaths of the Adeptus Astronomica. Some very few might even take up service with the Inquisition, rising to become psychically potent inquisitors themselves. Though never fully trusted, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica trained Primaris Psychers or formations of Weird Vein Psychers are valuable assets to any Imperial military commander, even if they are deeply feared by their superstitious comrades. Before beginning the Great Crusade to reunite the lost human colony worlds of the Sol Sector and beyond, in the late 30th millennium, the Emperor of Mankind first ordered the construction of the Astronomicon on Terra. The purpose of this colossal endeavor was that the entire device was to serve as a focus through which the Emperor could direct his fathomless psychic energies to generate a partly self-sustaining navigational beacon for the commercial and military starships of the Imperium. The resulting psychic navigational beam generated by the Astronomicon was able to cut through the warp across the galaxy. Those attuned to its frequencies and modulations, the sanctioned human mutants known as navigators, were able to use it as a beacon and pole star when plotting journeys through the immaterium, cutting travel times from solar months to mere solar days, while dramatically increasing the safety of such traverses. In addition to this invaluable beacon among the stars, the forging of the Imperium during the Great Crusade would not have been possible without the creation and skills of the Astra Telepathica. This special corps of interstellar telepathic communicators was created by the Emperor during the final months of the Unification Wars, as the Emperor had foreseen the absolute future need for a means to communicate across the depths of space if a new interstellar human empire was to be created. Though a psyker himself, the Emperor did not favor the use of psychic talents in others and was well aware of the dangers inherent in any contact with the warp. The age of strife on old Earth had been afflicted by many witch kings and demon-possessed psychers whose existence embodied those dangers, some of whom the Emperor had personally slain. However, he was able to identify those psychers strong enough to resist the temptations of the warp. These men and women were then employed in a variety of special roles in the newborn Imperium. Amongst these so-called sanctioned psychers were the astropaths, astrotelepaths, capable of telepathically communicating with others of their kind over vast interstellar distances through phantasmal visions, empathic transmission, and enological vision allegory rather than words. This was an essential talent for the success of the Imperium due to the vast distances that separated its inhabited worlds. The only practical means for the Imperium to maintain any semblance of unity across interstellar distances was to make use of astropaths, but such psychic communication could prove as temperamental as the warp itself. The headquarters of the Astra Telepathica during the Great Crusade and the early days of the Horus Heresy, known as the City of Sight, was built within a section of the Emperor's own imperial palace in the Himalayan mountains. There was no trace that anyone lived in that forsaken part of the palace. Potential sanctioned psychers spent many standard years within its bleak towers, learning how to harness their abilities for the betterment of mankind. Where other regions of the palace were celebrations of the unity wrought by the extension of the Emperor's rule over all of Terra, the builders of the City of Sight seemed to have gone out of their way to craft something calculated to weigh on the soul. Beyond the domain of the Astro Telepaths, the architecture of the palace was raised up in glorification of mankind's achievements, its statuary fashioned to remind the grateful populace of Terra of all that had been rebuilt in the wake of the terrible, world-spanning wars that had almost dragged the species down into extinction during the horrors of Old Night. But none of this could be found in the City of Sight. Beyond the threshold of the main entrance to the city that was known as the Obsidian Arch was a forest of iron towers, lightless garrets, and silent thoroughfares. The streets of the main portions of the Imperial Palace beyond the glossy black archway were alive with the heaving, vibrant mass of humanity, but only solitary ghosts in hooded green robes populated the streets of the City of Sight. The students and adepts of the Astra Telepathica mostly traveled by means of a network of tunnels and crossways cut into the rock beneath the city. Very few came above ground if they could help it, for the feeling of sunlight on their skin was just another reminder of what they had lost. The city walls and the rock below were also threaded with psi-disruptive crystals, which made it quieter as well for those with the telepath's gifts. Traveling above ground was noisy for an astropath. They were telepathically inundated with the noise of undisciplined thoughts, random chatter, and wild emotions. Though they were taught to tune this psychic cacophony of thought out, it was always in the background of their minds. It was easier for the telepaths to travel where they did not have to hear it. Within the City of Sight, its gloomy precincts had few statues raised there. Though many of the pale, columned buildings within were grandly shaped and heroically proportioned, they were brooding, monolithic structures that pressed down on the skin of the mountains, absorbing all the available light and warmth of the day. A notable building within the City of Sight was the Gallery of Mirrors, a vast, cathedral-like edifice through which successful initiates passed on their way to the awe-inspiring caverns beneath the city. Far beneath the Imperial Palace in the Imperial Dungeons, they would kneel before the Emperor and undergo the painful soul-binding ritual to have the impossibly complex neural pathways of their mind agonizingly reshaped to better resist the dangers and temptations of the warp. It is speculated that the mirrors were there to give the aspirants a last look at their faces before their eyes were seared from their sockets by a force so potent it was beyond imagining. Another notable structure was the Whispering Tower. It shone with a warm lattice of silver light, though it was a light that existed beyond the sight of most mortals. Yet for all its brightness, its glow was eclipsed utterly by the burning lance of light of the Astronomicon that speared from the hollow mountain and into space, like an interstellar beacon for those Imperial starships that traveled the myriad currents of the Immaterium. The vast chamber at the heart of the Whispering Tower was fashioned in the form of a great amphitheater, shaped by the ancient cognosynths, who had first raised the City of Sight many thousands of standard years earlier, long before the Imperial Palace had been constructed. That sect's unrivaled knowledge of psychically attuned architecture had been hard-won in a long-forgotten age of devastating psi wars during Old Night, but their arts were long dead, and the skill of crafting such resonant structures had died with them. Amid the blackened mind halls of the City of Sight, the Whispering Tower was able to reach the farthest into the gulfs of space between the stars, utilizing thousands of high-ranking astropaths seated in ever-ascending tiers to sharpen the focus of their gestalt consciousness. Rising through the central spine of the Whispering Tower was a long spiral staircase that led to the upper wing that housed the Oneirocritica Alcara Mundi, the great dream library of the City of Sight. Towering shelves, rearing hundreds of meters into the air, filled the sections of the Oneirocritica Alcara Mundi. Groaning stacks radiated from the central hub filled with interpretive texts, dream diaries, vision logs, and the many books of common astropathic imagery. Every astro-telepathic vision received and sent from the City of Sight was stored within, a complete record of communication that passed between Terra and the wider galaxy. Scores of hunched astropaths drifted through the stacks like green ghosts, seeking clarification for a vision, while elder telepaths added freshly approved symbols to the ever-growing library. The The lowest level of the Whispering Tower was the Novitiate's level. This chamber had been hacked from the bedrock of the mountains and faced with ceramic tiles of bottle green. It had the feel of a Medikite chamber, and a number of locked doors led deeper into the guts of the tower. Some led to the novice libraries, where new additions to the tower learned astropathic shorthand, common symbols, and the basic mantras of the nuncio. Others led to the novices' cells, some to communal facilities for eating and ablutions, and the remainder ended in hermetically sealed isolation chambers. Not everyone who navigated these passages was blind, and bare lumen globes hung from the brickwork ceiling on linked loops of brass cabling. Along the long passageway that led to the novices' cells were reinforced doors that punctuated its length, each one marked with a number and a name. Each marked cell was where an initiate of the Scholastica Psykana slumbered, meditated, and prayed. The interior of these cells were bare and devoid of anything that might have indicated who had lived there before. This was sensible, for any lingering psychometric sense of a previous occupant would influence an initiate's dreaming. A cot-bed usually lay along one wall, with a simple footlocker at its base. A small writing desk and chair sat opposite the bed, and a black notebook lay on a blotting pad next to an inkhorn and pen. Empty shelves lined the wall above the desk, ready to be filled with an astropath's steadily growing Onera Critica collection. The shelves were short, for a novice would take time to build a comprehensive library of imagery, symbolism, and dream recordings. Within the depths of the Whispering Tower was a domed chamber known as the Cryptesthesian that continuously echoed with the myriad voices of an astropathic choir. At the dome's apex was a crystalline lattice pulsing with internal illumination that cascaded from its multi-angled facets in a waterfall of shimmering light. Within this chamber, astropaths trained in the art of the Cryptesthesian could interpret meaning from the psychic waste of every communique that passed through the city of sight. To sift through the vast quantity of psychic debris that was left in its wake was a task few relished. Following the treachery of the War Master Horus and the start of the civil conflict known as the Horus Heresy, the astropathic choirs operated beyond capacity to satisfy the demands of waging a distant war against Horus Lupercal's rebellion. Etheric space was continuously awash with telepathic communication, and messages were hurled into the void that screamed for help or simply blared hatred. The trap chambers beneath the iron towers of the City of Sight were filled with psychic residue from the thousands of messages, and the Cryptesthesians could barely keep up with the brutal pace. In the face of treason, every message sent to Terra had to be carefully scrutinized, no matter how mundane it might appear. The bleed of psychic waste within the Cryptesthesian was scoured for signs of encryption that might be a communication intended for embedded agents of Horus within the Imperial Palace itself. The inhabitants of the City of Sight were devastated just before the start of the Horus Heresy, when Primarch Magnus the Red's attempt to use sorcery to warn the Emperor of Mankind of Horus's betrayal led him to breach the psychic wards around the Imperial Palace, protecting the Emperor's Webway project from assault by warp entities. Magnus's brute force assault on the Imperial Webway's wards allowed the power of the warp to briefly invade Terra. Millions of astropaths and other psychers died as their minds burned out or demons tore them apart. Miniature warp storms consumed entire settlements and flattened structures across the world. During the Age of Apostasy, a second period of civil war in the Imperium of Man that occurred during the early 36th millennium, when the Imperium's government was essentially seized by the corrupt High Lord Goga von Deer, he ruled the Imperium according to his own wishes instead of in accord with the Emperor's will. This lamentable period of history is known in Imperial annals as the Reign of Blood. During this time, Van Dyer had considerable trouble bringing the Adeptus Astra Telepathica under his control. Lord Phaedrus, the master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, was a potent psyker, and as such was not swayed by Van Dyer's charisma or charm. Phaedrus saw through Van Dyer's veil of lies and deceits and understood the corrupt High Lord's true intentions. Van Dyer realized that Phaedrus was using his considerable psychic abilities to stay one step ahead of him and simply killing Phaedrus would never do, for he would just be replaced by a powerful psyker of equal potency. To remove Phaedrus required a much more cunning plan. Luring the master of the Astra Telepathica into a trap, Vandire utilized the innate anti-psyker abilities of a Culexus Temple assassin to nullify Phaedrus's psychic abilities. The helpless Phaedrus was then strapped into a specially prepared life support machine, where the Culexus assassin permanently severed Phaedrus's ability to tap into the warp, making him incapable of using psychic powers. Such an operation would have normally killed the powerful psyker, but with the life support system and a bribed Magos biologist, Vandire was able to keep Phaedrus alive. Robbed of his psychic powers, Phaedrus was utterly distraught, which resulted in his multiple attempts to take his own life. But Vandire was always there to thwart him, removing the blade from his hand or to loosen the noose around his neck. In the end, Phaedrus was broken, and Vandire achieved his aim: control over the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. If Phaedrus did his bidding, Vandire promised that he would not disclose the loss of his psychic capabilities to his subordinates, who would have immediately replaced him, and even worse, pitied him. With his powerful position put in jeopardy, Phaedrus had little choice in the matter and acquiesced to all of Vandire's heretical demands. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica in the 41st millennium is divided into a recruitment body, the League of Black Ships, and a training body, the Scholastica Psykana. These two departments of the Adepta are united under the leadership of the Master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and their advisory council of several hundred senior officials drawn from its two divisions. During the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy eras, the Divisio Astra Telepathica possessed a militant arm, which was referred to internally within the records of the Adeptus Terra as the Departamento Investigates. But they were known throughout the galaxy as the Sisters of Silence, the Silent Sisterhood, and the Witch Seekers. The Silent Sisterhood was an all-female imperial order of witch hunters dedicated to the elimination of psychic threats to mankind. Their primary base of operations was the Somnus Citadel on Luna, the moon of Terra. Their purpose was to hunt and kill rogue human psychers whose activities presented a terrible danger to the people of the newborn Imperium of Man. The Sisters of Silence were well-trained warriors, and with the added benefit of their natural and innate anti-psyker abilities, they were dangerous opponents to the psychic enemies of mankind. Unlike other living beings, these women sworn to silence possessed no presence in the warp, and were therefore unaffected by all forms of psychic power. There were many names for them in the multitude of human cultures to be found across the galaxy: untouchables, pariahs, blanks, psychic nulls. All of the members of their order were non-psychic, for they bore the pariah gene, which made them immune to all forms of psychic assault and rendered their minds unreadable by telepathy. The sisters operated the Astra Telepathica's infamous black ships, which ranged across the galaxy following behind the Great Crusade's expeditionary fleets in search of rogue psychers to capture or expunge, seeking to collect and carry them back to Terra, where they would be tested and their eventual fate decided. Though few in number, the Sisters of Silence commanded great respect within the Imperium, and most servants of the Emperor regarded them with some awe. Few would willingly stand in their way or interfere with their activities, and few indeed were those who were comfortable in their presence. After the Horus Heresy, it was long believed that the Sisters of Silence were either destroyed long ago or were ultimately folded into the organization of the Imperial Inquisition. They disappeared from Imperial history for nearly 1,500 standard years until the Imperium faced annihilation at the hands of the massive Orc-Wa, led by the warlord known only as the Beast in the 32nd millennium. The last vestiges of the Silent Sisterhood would play a key role in defeating this Orc-Wa and diverting disaster. Though officially disbanded after the Age of Apostasy in the 36th millennium, many enclaves of the Silent Sisterhood still fought for the Imperial cause, albeit in a more secretive and elite capacity than before. With the resurrection of Robut Guilliman as the Lord Commander of the Imperium and Imperial Regent after the birth of the Great Rift in say 999. M41, the Silent Sisterhood, has begun to serve more openly alongside Imperial military forces such as the Indomitus Crusade once more. Though still small in number, it is now possible once again to see one or more of the Sisters of Silence accompanying the Black Ships on their vital duties. In the 41st millennium, where the strict anti-psyker strictures of the Council of Nicaea were long ago partially relaxed following the reformation of the Imperium in the wake of the Horus heresy during the time of rebirth, the League of Black Ships now forms the recruiting division of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. The League consists of a substantial fleet of Black Imperial starships charged with collecting and transporting psykers taken from worlds across Imperial space as part of the Imperial tithe to Terra. The Black Ships are feared transports filled with mournful psykers held in cavernous, psi-shielded holds to be taken back to Terra to feed the voracious psychic appetite of the Emperor in an ongoing attempt to maintain the power of the Astronomican's psychic beacon. Only those psykers with the strength of mind to withstand the constant soul-numbing despair that permeates the Black Ship may crew it. So mentally traumatic is such duty. The Black Ship fleet travels constantly throughout the Imperium. Each Imperial world is visited every 100 Terran years or so by a Black Ship. When a Black Ship nears an inhabited Imperial planet, its planetary governor is instructed to prepare the customary levy, a tithe of psykers. Once the levy has been collected, the Black Ship's captains make an initial evaluation of their cargo before proceeding to the next world in their circuit. When the ships are full, they return to Terra, and the psykers are transferred to the Scholastica Psykana before the ship leaves again to continue in their eternal search for new psykers. It is common for inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus or Ordo Hereticus to travel aboard the Black Ships, as this gives them a good opportunity to investigate a planet's potential for psychically based corruption. The Scholastica Psykana, the training division of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, is a vast teaching institution devoted to the training of young psykers who are taught how to develop and control their powers to serve the Imperium. Most of the psyker recruits are drawn from the levy collected by the Black Ships. Others are handed over by the Inquisition, the Adeptus Arbites, the Scholas Progenium, or through other Imperial channels. The future of each psyker depends on their abilities and character. Initial evaluation divides the levy into several groups depending on their innate psychic power, individual character, and willingness to learn. The youngest psykers are preferred by the Scholastica Psykana, as these frightened boys and girls are the easiest to train and indoctrinate. Such psykers are soul-bound to the Emperor, a psychic ritual that reshapes their cerebral cortexes and hardens their minds and souls against possession by the demonic entities of the warp. It is invariably those psykers recruited as children who are given further training to fill important positions in the Imperium as sanctioned psykers, one well-known example being the Inquisitor Gideon Ravenor. Those psykers of a levy who are deemed weak in character or psychic power, too dangerous to train or too old to have their bad habits changed, are instead sacrificed to the Emperor, their life forces leached from their bodies to sustain the Master of Mankind and power the Astronomican beacon that aids all Imperial interstellar travel. The first ranking of psykers, referred to as primary psykers, are those whose powers and strength of character are sufficient to resist possession and demonic corruption under normal circumstances, and they are chosen to serve the Imperium in the highest capacities, rarely being forced to undergo the soul-binding ritual. After receiving 5 Terran years of basic training at the Scholastica, they are sent for further training and service in another Imperial organization, depending on where their abilities are judged best suited. The very young may be handed over to and indoctrinated into the Space Marines as chapter librarians. Some may enter the Astra Militarum to begin their training as combat primaris psykers. The most talented may become inquisitors or even Grey Knights. The majority of the discovered psykers in a given levy form the second rank of psykers. They are trained for service as astropaths, that is, astro-telepaths. Astropaths are psykers specialized in interstellar astro-telepathic communication, being able to send and receive telepathic messages instantaneously over vast distances in the form of images and symbols that are psychically resonant with each astropath's own mind. The astropaths perform one of the most vital tasks in the Imperium. Telepathy is the only practical means of instant interstellar communications in the galaxy-spanning Imperium of Man. Some primary and secondary psychers are given over to the Adeptus Astronomica, a smaller Imperial Adepta in which the psychic recruits continue their training to serve and maintain the Astronomicon. Following the Great Imperial Conclave on Nicaea in 001, MEP 31, new strictures were laid down by the Emperor in regards to the use of psychers within the Imperium. It was decreed that the astropaths within the Whispering Tower would remain under the constant vigil and scrutiny of the Black Sentinels, a specially trained force of psyker killers, jailers, and executioners all in one. Each of these stalwart warriors was encased in beetle-black armor with contoured breastplates of burnished obsidian, their faces concealed by a reflective tapered helm, not unlike an early make of Space Marine Legion power armor. Their helmets were specially lined with psi shielding to protect them from the latent mental pressure generated by the innate powers of the psychers within the City of Sight. Each Black Sentinel was armed with long, black-bladed lances, their hafts topped with sparkling crystalline spearheads. But they were also trained in the use of the extensive arsenal of weapons possessed by the Imperium's armories. The Black Sentinels were also responsible for protecting the physical aspects of the city from any threat without, as well as the psyker threat within. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica is responsible for the operation of the fearful black ships. These vast ancient vessels ply the space lanes on solar decades-long circuits of the Imperium. Gathering at each planet, they visit all of the human psychers born to that world. These are interred in soul-shielded holds, and eventually brought to Terra when the vessel's holds are full, there to be judged worthy of a life in service to the Imperium or a death in communion with the Emperor. Plenty never even make it to Terra, being judged by their keepers as too dangerous to live a minute more, even in the bleak holds of the black ships. Due to their mission, there is a fair amount of interaction between the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and the members of the Ordo Hereticus. One of the few obligations of Imperial commanders is that they conduct regular psyker purges and render up those they find when the black ships arrive. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica employs all manner of arcane enumerations in order to predict the number of psychers the population of any given world is likely to spawn in a single generation, and the quantity grows each year. So when a world's offering comes up short of this prediction, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica has cause for concern. If the adepts' fears are great enough, they call upon the Inquisition to investigate matters. The consequences of a world failing to hand over its psyker population are too terrible to comprehend, and so it is not uncommon for the Adeptus to supply the Inquisitor with specialized Imperial-sanctioned psychers, should they be needed, in order to combat the threat. Psi cults are pernicious enemies indeed, able to dominate entire segments of a population. Other groups trade in psyker slaves, drugging the poor unfortunates and subjecting them to all manner of ritualized trauma in order to ride the wave of thrilling madness they telepathically radiate. Others, such as criminal figures, seek to use the psyker's talents to their own ends. Ultimately, however, such misdeeds always lead to disaster. An enslaved psyker escapes and wreaks revenge against all within a dozen kilometers. The cult delves too deeply into forbidden knowledge and mass possession, and demonic incursion ensue. The unbound psyker loses control of their powers, and death and insanity are unleashed. Only the greatest of witch hunters can hope to prevail against such foes, and even they request the aid of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica in combating their foes. In addition to such aid being provided, Inquisitors, in common with every branch of the Imperium, rely upon the services of astropaths for communications across the void. These adepts are provided to the many arms of the Imperium by the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and pledged to the service of the organization they serve. In the case of the Inquisition, Many Inquisitors prefer to maintain the permanent services of a trusted astropath, that their communications might remain secure and uncorrupted by the actions of their rivals and enemies. Another reason for the relatively close ties between the two organizations is that a large number of Inquisitors are gifted with psychic powers themselves, and therefore were trained in their use by the Adepts of the Telepathica. In fact, such Inquisitors owe their very lives to such Adepts, for they might have been judged undeserving of life or too weak to control their powers, or else consigned to the Adeptus Astronomica. It is not uncommon for Inquisitors of the Ordo Hereticus to serve on board the black ships themselves, witnessing firsthand the methods the Adeptus uses to suppress and control its charges. Arriving at a world, the Inquisitor is able to lend their aid in the gathering of the cull to ensure that no psychers are withheld, and to make sure the Emperor receives his due. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica, while primarily known for its role in recruiting and training psychers, also plays a crucial part in maintaining the Imperium's vast bureaucracy. One of its lesser-known functions is the maintenance of the Telepathica Choir, a group of highly specialized psychers who work in concert to amplify and direct psychic signals across the galaxy. This choir is essential for coordinating large-scale military operations and relaying critical information between distant sectors of the Imperium. Within the ranks of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, there exists a secretive order known as the Cryptesthesians. These individuals possess a unique ability to decipher and interpret the most complex and obscure psychic messages. Their skills are often called upon in times of crisis when standard astropathic communications become unreliable or compromised. The Cryptesthesians work in isolated chambers deep within the Obsidian Keep, shielded from external psychic interference. The training regimen for aspiring astropaths is notoriously grueling and dangerous. Beyond the well-known soul-binding ritual, initiates must undergo a series of psychic trials known as the Gauntlet of Echoes. This process involves navigating a psychically charged labyrinth filled with manifestations of their own fears and doubts. Many candidates fail to complete the gauntlet, their minds shattered by the experience. Those who emerge successful are considered to have the mental fortitude necessary to serve the Imperium. One of the most closely guarded secrets of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica is the existence of the Nexus Temporalis. This is a specialized chamber within the City of Sight, where a select group of psychers with precognitive abilities work tirelessly to glimpse potential futures. Their visions are carefully recorded and analyzed, providing valuable strategic insights to the highest echelons of Imperial leadership. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica maintains a network of hidden outposts known as whisper stations throughout the galaxy. These facilities serve as relay points for astropathic communications, allowing for more reliable long-distance transmissions. Each whisper station is staffed by a small contingent of astropaths and protected by a cadre of elite guards trained in anti-psyker combat techniques. In recent centuries, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica has been experimenting with the integration of archaeotech devices to enhance their psychers' abilities. One such device is the Amplificator Mentis, a cranial implant that boosts the range and clarity of astropathic transmissions. However, the use of such technology remains controversial within the organization, with traditionalists arguing against tampering with the Emperor-given gifts of psychers. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica also oversees the Sanctuary Program, a little-known initiative designed to protect and nurture exceptionally powerful psychers who are too volatile for standard Imperial service. These individuals are housed in specially constructed facilities on remote worlds, where they can develop their abilities without posing a threat to the wider Imperium. Some whisper that these sanctuaries may one day produce psychers powerful enough to rival even the legendary Primarchs. Within the ranks of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, there exists a specialized division known as the Void Watchers. These individuals are trained to monitor the psychic emanations of the warp for signs of large-scale chaos activity or impending invasions. Their vigil is eternal, and the strain of their duty often leads to madness or worse. However, their early warnings have saved countless Imperial worlds from destruction. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica maintains a vast library of psychic imprints known as the Arcanum Psykana. This repository contains the mental echoes of countless psychers who have served the Imperium throughout its history. Senior members of the organization can access this knowledge, tapping into the collective experiences and wisdom of their predecessors to aid in their duties. In times of dire need, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica can deploy psychic strike teams. These elite units consist of battle-trained psychers supported by Calexis assassins, creating a formidable force capable of neutralizing enemy psychers and disrupting warp-based strategies. The deployment of such teams is rare and requires authorization from the highest levels of Imperial command. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica has recently begun exploring the potential of synthetic psychers. These artificial beings, created through a combination of genetic engineering and arcane technologies, show promise in augmenting the Imperium's psychic capabilities without the risks associated with natural-born psychers. However, the project remains highly experimental and shrouded in secrecy. In conclusion, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica's role in the Imperium extends far beyond the recruitment and training of psychers. Its various specialized divisions, secret projects, and hidden facilities all work in concert to maintain the psychic infrastructure that keeps the vast empire of mankind functioning in the grim darkness of the far future. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica's influence extends beyond the realm of psychic communications and psyker management. One of its lesser-known responsibilities is the maintenance of the Telepathica Umbra, a clandestine network of non-psychic operatives who serve as the organization's eyes and ears across the Imperium. These agents, often disguised as ordinary citizens or low-ranking administrative functionaries, gather intelligence on potential psyker activity and report back to their handlers using specially encoded astropathic transmissions. Within the halls of the Obsidian Keep, there exists a secretive chamber known as the Vault of Echoes. This heavily guarded facility houses a collection of psychically active artifacts gathered from across the galaxy. Many of these items are too dangerous to destroy but too valuable to discard. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica employs a cadre of specially trained psychers, known as Echo Wardens, to contain and study these artifacts, hoping to glean insights that might benefit the Imperium. The organization has also developed a unique form of combat psyker known as the Psychic Nullifiers. These individuals undergo extensive training and augmentation to enhance their ability to disrupt and neutralize enemy psychic powers. Deployed in small teams, psychic nullifiers are often attached to inquisitorial retinues or specialized Astra Militarum units tasked with combating warp-based threats. One of the most closely guarded secrets of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica is the existence of the Omega Protocol. This contingency plan, known only to the highest-ranking members of the organization, outlines procedures for maintaining astropathic communications in the event of a catastrophic failure of the Astronomicon. While the details remain classified, rumors suggest that it involves a network of hidden psychic beacons and specially prepared astropaths capable of functioning independently of the Emperor's guiding light. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica also oversees the operation of the Scholastica Psykana Extremis, a series of hidden facilities dedicated to training the most powerful and dangerous psychers discovered by the Black Ships. These individuals, deemed too volatile for standard Imperial service, but too valuable to sacrifice to the Golden Throne, undergo rigorous mental conditioning and psychic trials. Those who survive often emerge as formidable weapons in the Imperium's arsenal, capable of unleashing devastating psychic attacks against the enemies of mankind. In recent centuries, the organization has been experimenting with the creation of psychic choirs composed entirely of abhumans. These choirs, primarily consisting of specially selected ogrins and ratlings, have shown surprising effectiveness in certain types of astropathic communications. The project, codenamed Operation Harmony, remains controversial within the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, with traditionalists arguing against the use of such impure vessels for the Emperor's work. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica maintains a fleet of specialized vessels known as the Whisper Ships. Unlike the ominous Black Ships, these craft are designed for rapid response to psychic emergencies across the Imperium. Equipped with advanced warp drives and staffed by elite teams of combat psychers and nullifiers, Whisper Ships can quickly deploy to worlds experiencing sudden outbreaks of psychic phenomena or warp-based incursions. Within the organization, there exists a small but influential group known as the Prognosticators. These individuals possess an innate talent for interpreting the complex web of psychic currents that flow through the warp. By analyzing patterns in astropathic communications and psychic phenomena, prognosticators can often predict future events with uncanny accuracy. Their insights are highly valued by Imperial strategists and planners. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica has recently begun exploring the potential of psychic augmentation through cybernetic enhancements. The Techno-Psychic Integration Program, a collaborative effort with select members of the Adeptus Mechanicus, aims to develop ways to amplify and stabilize psychic abilities through the use of advanced technology. Early results have been promising, but the long-term effects of such augmentations remain unknown. One of the organization's most ambitious projects is the development of the Psychic Nexus Array. This vast network of psychically attuned crystals, spread across key worlds throughout the Imperium, is designed to create a secondary astropathic communication system that can function even in areas of high warp turbulence. The project is still in its early stages, but if successful, it could revolutionize interstellar communication within the Imperium. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica also maintains a specialized division known as the Warp Cartographers. These uniquely talented individuals possess the ability to mentally map the ever-shifting tides of the warp. Their insights are invaluable to the navigators of the Navis Nobilitae, helping to plot safer and more efficient routes through the treacherous realms of the Immaterium. In response to the growing threat of chaos infiltration, the organization has implemented a new security protocol known as the Psychic Purity Index. This complex system uses a combination of psychometric readings, behavioral analysis, and regular psychic screenings to monitor the mental and spiritual health of all members of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. Those who show signs of corruption or instability are quickly identified and dealt with, ensuring the continued integrity of the organization. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica has also been instrumental in the development of new psychic defensive technologies. One such innovation is the Null Field Generator, a device capable of creating localized areas of psychic nullification. These generators are often deployed to protect critical Imperial installations from warp-based attacks or infiltration. In conclusion, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica continues to evolve and adapt to the ever-changing threats facing the Imperium. Through its various specialized divisions, secret projects, and innovative technologies, the organization strives to harness the power of the human mind in service to the Emperor and the survival of mankind in the grim darkness of the far future. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica's role in the Imperium's conflicts often goes unnoticed, but their contributions have been crucial in numerous battles and campaigns. One such instance was the psychic siege of Hydra Cordatus, where a cadre of chaos sorcerers attempted to overwhelm the planet's defenses through a massive warp storm. The local astropathic choir, led by Master Astropath Elara Vox, formed a psychic barrier that held the chaos forces at bay for weeks, allowing Imperial reinforcements to arrive and break the siege. During the infamous Tyrannid invasion of the Cryptus system, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica played a pivotal role in coordinating the defense efforts. A specialized team of combat psychers, known as the Cryptus Vigil, used their abilities to disrupt the Tyrannid hive mind's synaptic control over its swarms. This intervention bought precious time for the Blood Angels and their successor chapters to mount an effective counterattack, ultimately saving billions of lives. The Battle of Shadowlight Station stands as one of the most harrowing engagements in recent Adeptus Astra Telepathica history. This deep space facility, used for training elite astropaths, came under attack by a warband of Night Lord's Chaos Space Marines. The station's defenders, led by the venerable astropath Primaris Zephyrus Hal, used their psychic abilities in innovative ways to confuse and misdirect the attackers. By projecting false sensor readings and illusory reinforcements, they managed to hold out until a nearby Imperial Navy patrol could respond to their distress call. In the wake of the Great Rifts formation, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica faced one of its greatest challenges, the Blackout Wars. As warp storms raged across the galaxy, many astropathic relay stations fell silent or became corrupted by chaos influence. The organization launched a series of daring missions to reclaim or destroy these compromised facilities, often pitting small teams of combat psychers and nullifiers against overwhelming odds. The sacrifices made during these operations ensured that vital communication lines remained open for Imperial forces struggling to respond to countless new threats. The Gorax incursion showcased the Adeptus Astra Telepathica's ability to turn the tide of battle through unconventional means. When a massive orc wag threatened to overwhelm the Forge world of Gorax Prime, a desperate plan was put into action. A choir of 100 of the most powerful psychers in the sector was assembled, their minds linked in a complex psychic ritual. At the height of the battle, this choir projected a massive psychic illusion that made the orc forces believe their war boss had been killed. The resulting confusion and infighting among the orcs allowed Imperial forces to regroup and ultimately claim victory. The defense of the Sanctum Psychologis on Titan, one of the most important training facilities for the Grey Knights, saw unprecedented cooperation between the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and the Secretive Chapter. When a war band of Thousand Sons Chaos Space Marines launched an assault on the moon, seeking to corrupt its psychic defenses, a joint force of Grey Knight Purifiers and Astra Telepathica's Psychic Nullifiers stood as the last line of defense. The battle raged both in the physical realm and the immaterium, with the defenders using their combined abilities to create a psychic null zone that negated the sorcerous powers of the attackers. The Hellfire Crusade of Magos Drasticus presented a unique challenge to the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. This renegade tech priest had developed a way to infuse warp energies into machine spirits, creating an army of demon-possessed war machines. In response, the organization deployed its newly formed techno-psychic integration teams. These augmented psychers used their abilities to exorcise the corrupted machine spirits while simultaneously disrupting the enemy's control systems. Their efforts were instrumental in bringing down Drasticus's cybernetic abominations and ending his heretical crusade. One of the most controversial operations in recent Adeptus Astra Telepathica history was the Purge of Zephyrus Secundus. When a powerful psyker cult known as the Illuminated Path took control of this populous hive world, the organization made the difficult decision to deploy a weapon of last resort, the Omega-class psyker Alexos Void. Void's uncontrolled psychic abilities were capable of neutralizing all warp activity within a planetary radius, but at the cost of burning out the minds of any psychers caught in the effect, including himself. The success of the mission came at a terrible price, with millions of innocent lives lost in the psychic backlash. The siege of the Whispering Tower stands as a testament to the inner strength of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. When a cell of Chaos infiltrators managed to penetrate the defenses of this vital facility on Terra itself, the organization's leadership found themselves cut off from external support. Led by Lord Telepathica Primarchus Vale, the tower's inhabitants, from the lowliest acolyte to the most senior astropaths, formed an improvised defense force. Using their psychic abilities in creative ways, they managed to hold off the attackers for 3 days until custodian reinforcements could breach the chaos-erected barriers and liberate the tower. In conclusion, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica's role in the defense and preservation of the Imperium cannot be overstated. From the silent halls of the Obsidian Keep to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, Its agents work tirelessly to maintain the psychic infrastructure that holds humanity's vast empire together. Through their sacrifices, innovations, and unwavering dedication, they stand as a bulwark against the encroaching darkness that threatens to engulf the galaxy. As the Imperium faces ever-growing threats from without and within, the Adeptus Astra Telepathica continues to adapt and evolve. New training techniques, experimental technologies, and daring strategies are constantly being developed to meet the challenges of a universe hostile to human existence. Yet, at its core, the organization remains true to its founding principles: to harness the power of the human mind in service to the Emperor and to safeguard humanity's future among the stars. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the silent heroes of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica stand ready to face whatever horrors the galaxy may unleash. Their minds are humanity's greatest weapon, their will unbreakable, their purpose clear. For in the never-ending battle for survival, it is not just through force of arms that the Imperium endures, but through the indomitable spirit of those who dare to look into the abyss of the warp and whisper defiance to the chaos beyond.